Welcome to the Level Plummet Square. Join with me as I climb the Everest like learning curve of podcasting.
Hi, and welcome to my shop. Okay, well, it's not really my shop, it's the driveway, but as you can see, I'm surrounded by wine barrels here, and that's going to be the project we'll be working on over the next couple of podcasts. We're going to be making this adirondack chair using wine barrel staves. It's a great project. It challenges you because you got to work in different ways you didn't think about before. Wine barrel staves are tapered, bent, and cupped. So traditional squaring methods aren't really going to work, and you kind of have to work more by eye and feel when you're doing this. We're going to start by, at the very beginning, we're going to take apart some wine barrels and stack those up and get them ready to dry, because these particular barrels have had wine in them recently, and it will take a few months for them to really dry out and get to a decent moisture content. Although moisture, because it's not traditional joinery, moisture content is not the biggest issue with these. Is we're going to try to take there's a series of nails that hold the barrel hoops in place. They're T-shaped nails about 3/8 of an inch long, and we're going to pop those off there before we drive off the hoops. The reason we do this is that we don't want to damage the wood when we drag that across when we take these off. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I found that a cold chisel kind of pop those loose, and then we can just grab them. And we can just grab them with a set of pliers and twist them out. Sometimes they do shear off, but that's okay. Okay, to get the barrel hoops off, I'm going to use a 5-foot wrecking bar. It's got kind of a spud on the end and does a really good job of catching the barrel hoops and just pounding them off. We'll start in the center with the center hoops and just work our way to the end. I think this first one's about ready to go. And it's just that easy. Well, we're ready to begin the sanding process, and all I do is I use a random orbital sander, and I just sand to 120 grit. This is designed for outside furniture. I really don't see a need to go any farther than that, although between coats of finish I will sand certain parts with higher grits to get a smoother finish. To start off with, I need to build 4 of these chairs for a customer as well as my wife. So I'm going to kind of batch it out. We're going to start by building the backs of the chairs. So we're going to sand the pieces specific to the backs, get those built, set them aside, and then we can go on and build the other parts to the chair. Well, I've been sanding for a little while, and I want to stop and talk to you a little bit about a few things that you will encounter if you decide to take on building one of these chairs or some of the other projects. First of all, you're probably going to want to buy multiple barrels. One of the things to look for when you're buying barrels is that the hoop pattern on the barrels is the same. So if you look at this, I have a couple different hoop patterns here, and I don't know if those are visible or not. We'll move them a little bit closer. But you can see that they are different. One has more hoops than the other, and that's fine as long as they're consistent. Now, there's a couple areas in the chair where you're going to see this side. The arms are really important on the chair, that you have the same hoop pattern because you're looking straight down at them. The back, you can will be able to see the hoop pattern, and it's nice as you look along the back of the chair that you can see that it appears to be all from one barrel. The other thing to be concerned about when you're looking at barrels and you're trying to line up your stacks is that they have the same curvature to the barrel. These the way they're bent, they can be a little bit different. So when you're actually doing the construction end of things like the back, you want them all to have the same curve. If you have one that has less of a curve or something like that, then it'll stick out and poke you in the back or in the seat. So you kind of want to be aware of the curvature of the barrel when you're also looking at it. The other thing you're going to run into quite a bit when you're taking apart these old barrels, especially if you're more into whiskey barrels, they tend to have a little more rust because they aged the whiskey a little bit longer. And so you'll get rust where the hoops. So one of the things I like to do is I have one of these little armadillo belt sanders with 100 grit sandpaper on it. I can run it over that. It takes out that rust really quickly, and then I can jump over to the random orbital and finish up the project. Before we get going too much farther on this project, I want to stop and take a look at the plans. So I purchased some plans from Gold Country Woodworks, and they're pretty good plans. They're really detailed. They have a good cut list for it, as well as good full-size drawings as well. As you can see, there's probably 2 sheets of full-size drawings. From that, I was able to use some tracing paper and laid out some full-size templates that I could actually lay on the barrel staves so I could mark the locations of what I needed. After I built the first chair and sat, it wasn't exactly what I was looking for as far as comfort. Also, I felt that the chair was a little bit high for one. I didn't like the way the back, I thought the back could have been leaning backwards just a little bit more, and maybe the arm set just a little bit lower. So I went ahead and took some measurements, made some changes, and I've made some corrections to the plans that I feel make this chair just that much better. Now, if you want to get these plans, you can purchase them off the internet. They're not very expensive. I'll kind of tell you where I've made a few changes as we go along, but really I think it's build one, get your sense of what works for you, and you can take it and make these exactly the way you want it to do. And you can do it on your first chair by just doing some simple mock-ups, use some good clamps, sit in the chair every once in a while and make sure that it's exactly what you're looking for. Well, I've gone and I've sorted all of my staves, and what I've done is I've put them into matched pairs, and I looked for both width. If you turn these over, you would notice that they are the exact same width. And then I've also had to check for the curvature. So I make sure that when I line them up side by side, they're flush when you go against each other. I went to that big stack, I put together as many pairs as I could and set them aside. And now that I'm ready to start assembling the back, I've laid out my jig, which is because it's bent and curved. I basically set up a jig using a couple of old barrel staves, and I have them laid out with a center line so that they're lined up on the table. My center line is lined up, and I've made sure by checking my diagonals that everything should line up perfectly. Well, I have a jig set up to assemble the back on, and what I'm going to start with is I have pieces that have been sanded now, and we're just going to lay those out. I put the widest one in the middle, and I'm just trying to get them in approximate location. So the widest one in the middle, the second 2 widest are going to go on either side, and then the next 2 widest will go on those sides, and then we'll go out with 1 more set. If everything works out right, these should fit in here with just a little bit of play. I'll try to make sure I do have a center line there. I'll try to make sure that center one stays centered, and we'll get this laid out, and I'll put a couple wedges in here to hold the top in place, and then we can start putting on the horizontal staves. Now that I have the back laid out, I will let you know I had some trouble trying to get it symmetrical, and what it turns out is as I was measuring cross corners, they weren't coming out just right. When I ended up checking, I found out that one of the barrel staves was just about 1/4 of an inch longer than the other side, and that threw all the measurements off. All I did was measure down, make a mark to the correct length on the barrel stave that was too long, and I started measuring those marks, and everything came out just right. Here's the back stave, or the back support, and we're going to go ahead and lay that out. I have a center line marked on it, and I'll just line that up visually to start off with the back. I also have a couple of small marks back here, 4 inches up from the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and get those marked out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from side to side and make sure that we have roughly the same length on each side as I do this. Looks like about 6 7/8 is going to be the number. Make sure it lines up with my 4-inch mark. Okay, that looks good. And then just to make sure, I'm also going to measure my diagonals again. This is really important that you do this, otherwise things will get off. And we'll just double check that. 7 3 3/4. That looks great. So For fasteners, I'm using a stainless steel fastener. I'm just going to drill and countersink those, and we'll get going. As we work through these, just to let you know, all the screw holes are countersunk and they also will be plugged. So now that I have the bottom horizontal stave secured with at least one screw through to each vertical stave, I'm ready to place my mid rail stave. And this is the important placement because this mid rail is what's going to determine the angle of the arm on the chair when you're done. And what I found is that 12 inches, measuring on the outside, I measure 12 inches from the top of the mid rail to the bottom of the bottom stave, bottom horizontal stave. That gives me just about the right angle that I'm looking for. I made some marks, got it laid out exactly where I want it to be, and then to double check, I went ahead and measured my diagonals again to make sure that it was even. This will make things a lot easier during the assembly of the chair when you're trying to pull together the chair and keep it all square and together in one piece, even though nothing is straight on it. I now have all the horizontal barrel staves in the basic place where I want them. I've drilled holes for all the screws, although there's only screws in about half of these holes. One of the things you'll run into is there's going to be gaps in between the horizontal staves and the vertical staves. Now on the end ones, it's pretty easy just to put a clamp on and get those tight up against there. But how do you get this one in the middle tight? Well, the way I found to do that, because it is curved, I take a barrel stave, an old barrel stave, and I just slide it underneath. And then I set another chunk of stave on there. You'll have lots of scrap when you do this project. And I'll just hold that up, put a clamp on each side, and that will suck everything up to where it needs to be very quickly. So we'll get this in place. What I may have to do is back off that original screw just a little bit. Couple quick squeezes. Now we have a nice tight fit, and we'll go ahead and get that installed. Once we get these installed, I'll just move out and do the other vertical staves as I move out, just by unclamping and moving the center block over and then reclamping that. Now that we have the back all assembled, I've made sure all the screws are seated tight and everything is tight against the horizontal rails. This back is done and ready to set aside, and I just have 3 more to go.
That's all we have time for today. Join me next time when we construct the front H brace and install the copper rivets, as well as put the legs in place. Until next time, keep it level, plumb it square.